Many believe that after the death of Jeffrey Epstein, his island was abandoned. But the truth is quite different. In 2023, 3 men decided to invade Little St. James in search of answers. What they didn't know was that the island was still active. Cameras turned on, doors sealed, and recent tracks showed that someone never left. They were being watched. What began as a clandestine expedition turned into a desperate escape. Now, you will know this story. Sit back, put on your headphones and get ready to enter the Forbidden Island. Since the death of Jeffrey Epstein in 2019, his private island, Little St. James, became a symbol of horror and impunity. For years, rumors have circulated about what was really happening on that isolated patch of land in the U.S. Virgin Islands. When investigations finally caught up with him, the billionaire died in prison under suspicious circumstances, and the case was quickly closed. But not everyone believed that the full truth had been revealed. One of these skeptics was Daniel Rojas, a former Mexican criminal investigator who spent years collecting information about Epstein. He studied every testimony, every omitted piece of evidence, every name linked to the island. For him, everything indicated that the authorities had hidden more than they had revealed. The island, now abandoned, hid secrets that were never brought to light. Suspicion turned into obsession when Lucas Mendez, a Brazilian hacker, found something unexpected in satellite records. In October 2023, he detected electrical activity on the island. The property was supposed to be completely decommissioned, but some buildings were still consuming energy. Furthermore, radar data indicated suspicious movements near the old main house. If the island was truly deserted, then who or what was still there? The discovery was what convinced Daniel to act. He called Tomás Valle, an Argentine documentary filmmaker specializing in clandestine expeditions. Together, the 3 decided to leave for the island and discover the truth. The plan was simple: arrive before dawn, explore for a few hours and leave before they are detected. They left from St. Thomas, a neighboring island, in a small vessel, sailing through the dark sea. The trip lasted around 2 hours, with waves crashing against the boat's hull, while an uncomfortable silence took over the group. None of them said what they really thought, but they all felt the weight of the decision. It wasn't just any exploration. They were entering a territory marked by crimes that shocked the world. When they finally saw Little St. James on the horizon, a shiver ran through the 3 of them. Even in the bluish light of dawn, the place seemed charged with something invisible. The abandonment was evident, but there was something beyond that. An oppressive atmosphere enveloped the island, as if something was watching them before they even disembarked. The boat was anchored away from the main pier. They couldn't risk being seen if there was someone on the island. They stepped onto the sand in silence, feeling the salty wind blow against their faces. The smell of salt air was strong, but there was something else in the air, an odor Daniel recognized from his years working in criminal investigations. Decomposition. The first point to be explored was the residential complex, where Epstein often received his guests. The main structure, a luxurious-looking mansion, was with the doors wide open, as if they had been left that way deliberately. The interior looked like an abandoned movie set, overturned furniture, scattered documents, clothes still hanging in some closets. Time had left its mark there, but something was bothering them. There were signs of recent movement. The footprints on the dusty floor indicated that someone was there before them. Lucas searched the halls while checking the data stored on his notebook. The island surveillance system was still active. The server was not completely shut down, which meant that cameras somewhere were still operating. If the cameras were working, someone could be watching their movements. The tension increased as they delved deeper into the exploration. On the upper floor of the mansion, they found partially burned documents, destroyed records and broken electronic equipment, as if someone had tried to eliminate evidence. But what caught their attention the most was a locked metal door underground. Unlike the other areas explored, that entrance seemed recent. The surrounding concrete still showed marks of recent work, suggesting that that space was modified shortly before the island was officially abandoned. Daniel's instinct told him they were facing something important. But before they could think about opening the door, they noticed a detail that made their hearts race. In the corner of the room, very close to the wall, a bottle of water was still half full. Someone was there in the last few days. And now, there were only two possibilities. Or whoever was on the island had already left. Or he was still there, hidden, watching every step they took. The silence inside the mansion was suffocating. The air carried an invisible weight, as if the island rejected the invaders' presence. The three knew something was wrong. Little St. James should have been abandoned, but the signs were clear, someone was still there. The bottle of water left on the table, the recent tracks on the dusty floor and the presence of active electricity left no doubt. The time they had to explore and quickly exit was decreasing by the second. If there really was someone there, then that someone already knew of your presence. Daniel Rojas' goal had always been to find hidden evidence that would show the world what really happened on the island. But now, another instinct took over him, survival. The mansion still had many rooms to be explored, but the point that caught the most attention was the locked metal door in the basement. Unlike the other disturbed areas, that entrance looked recently reinforced. The surrounding concrete still showed signs of work, suggesting that the site was modified shortly before the island was officially abandoned. Whatever was in there, someone made a point of hiding it well. Lucas Mendez analyzed the island's internal networks. What he found only increased the tension. Although most security systems have been disabled, there was a local network still operating. Someone was accessing the servers remotely, maintaining a certain level of control over the structure. This meant that they weren't just exploring an abandoned island. They were invading a territory that was still monitored. Daniel looked around the room once again, trying to find something that could help them open the door. Meanwhile, Tomas Valle examined the burned files and destroyed equipment. He didn't need much to understand that evidence was deliberately erased before the island was evacuated. But if they were destroying evidence, why did they seal the basement door instead of eliminating everything? After a few minutes of searching the place, Daniel found a heavy iron bar, possibly part of an old installation. With no other option, he delivered a direct blow to the lock. The impact echoed through the empty house, and a shiver ran through the three of them. On the second blow, the latch gave way, releasing the door. The cold air that came out of the underground passage was thick, stuffy, thick with mold and something even more disturbing. A concrete staircase led down into a narrow hallway, lit only by dimly blinking emergency lights. The room was damp, and the heavy smell of rust and decay permeated the walls. The first point of attention was a power panel. The basement had its own electrical system, which was still functional. This explained the energy consumption detected on satellites, but it also meant that someone could be accessing that space recently. Next to the panel, metal drawers were full of documents filed in black folders. Some were sealed, but others appeared partially burned. As if someone had tried to destroy the evidence, but hadn't been able to finish it. Daniel pulled out one of the folders and leafed through it quickly. Names, dates, financial records. Some identifications were scratched out, but others were still legible. The scariest thing was that some records were from 2021 and 2022. If Epstein died in 2019 and the island was officially decommissioned shortly after, how could those records exist? Tomas turned on the camera and started recording everything. Meanwhile, Lucas, trying to access the remote network, encountered something even more disturbing. The island surveillance system was still active. The cameras were spread out at strategic points, the pier, the residential complex, some external areas, and the basement itself. It was at that moment that they realized something terrifying. On one of the screens, there was live footage of the same underground corridor they were in. Someone, somewhere, was watching his every move. Lucas quickly disconnected the cables, trying to prevent his location from being tracked. But perhaps it was already too late. What they found next only added to the terror. At the bottom of the underground corridor, a steel-reinforced door, similar to a safe, was ajar. As they approached, they realized that the space inside was much larger than they had imagined. Inside the room there was storage drawers, similar to morgues, some still sealed. On metal tables were files, sealed plastic bags and closed metal boxes with numerical codes. In the corner of the room, a glass wall separated a reserve space. Inside, there was restraint chairs still attached to the floor, with leather straps, scuff marks on the metal and signs of rust on the buckles. Whatever happened in that place, it wasn't that long ago. Daniel felt his chest tighten. It was impossible not to imagine what kind of activities had taken place there. They started filming and recording everything, but every second in that space felt like a mistake. Instinct said someone could show up at any time. And that's exactly what happened. Upstairs, a dry noise echoed through the mansion. I was there with them. Tomas immediately turned off the camera, while Daniel turned off the flashlight. The underground was plunged into total darkness. The sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the ceiling. Lucas held the notebook tightly. The initial plan was to find evidence and leave quickly, but now the objective was different. Survive. The darkness underground became suffocating. The only sound was the echo of footsteps above them, steady and heavy, echoing off the concrete ceiling. Daniel, Tomas and Lucas cowered behind the metal shelves, holding their breath. The air was thick with a stale smell of rust and damp. That place, which until minutes ago was just a mystery to be unraveled, now became an underground coffin. What started as an investigation mission had now turned into a survival game. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. I tried to hear how many people were upstairs. There were at least 2. The sound of footsteps spread between the rooms, as if they were searching the mansion. The 3 knew that if they were caught, no one would ever know what happened to them. The underground was a trap. There was only one entrance and one exit, the same door through which they entered. They were surrounded. Lucas pressed the notebook against his chest. Fear was visible on his face. They had discovered information that should never have been found. Now they were sure that the island had never really been abandoned. Daniel motioned for the others to move. Slowly, they crept to the corner of the room, where a stack of boxes formed a partial barrier. The footsteps upstairs intensified. Someone knocked on a door loudly, as if realizing that the basement lock had been picked. Their time was running out. Tomas held the camera. He still filmed, even in the darkness, capturing the muffled sound of approaching danger. He knew that that record could be the only proof of what was about to happen. It was then that they heard a sound that made their hearts race. The metal basement door opened slowly, creaking in absolute silence. Daniel held the iron bar tightly. If I needed to fight, I would fight. The dim light from the stairs revealed 2 silhouettes descending. Large men, dressed in black, holding tactical flashlights and handguns. Their features were invisible in the dim light, but their posture was clear. They were there to eliminate any threat. Lucas flinched, breaking into a cold sweat. Tomas held the camera with shaking hands. Daniel knew they needed a plan, and quickly. He looked around. The only place to hide would be metal storage chambers, similar to those used in morgues. With no other option, he made a signal and the 3 moved quickly. They opened some empty drawers and squeezed inside, closing the doors slowly from the inside, leaving just a crack for air. Seconds later, the men entered the room. Flashlight lights searched every corner. One of them kicked a table, knocking papers and boxes onto the floor. The other walked to the destroyed files and rummaged through the documents, making sure nothing had been taken. The silence was agonizing. Inside the metal drawers, Daniel tried to control his breathing. The space was tight, and the cold of the steel chilled his skin. He felt his heart pounding against his chest. Then one of the men stopped exactly in front of the drawer where Tomas was hiding. Daniel closed his eyes. If they were discovered, they would be dead. The man stood still for long seconds. Then he took 2 steps back. "There's no one here," he said, with an accent that Daniel couldn't identify. But someone was. The other man pointed to the ground. Fresh footprints were marked in the accumulated dust. "We need to be sure," said the second. Daniel knew what this meant before it even happened. The man he started opening the metal drawers one by one, checking each compartment. Their time was running out. With each drawer that was opened, the destination got closer. Lucas squinted, holding the notebook as if it were a shield. Tomas was sweating, feeling the cold of the metal against his skin. When Daniel's drawer was pulled out, he acted before he was seen. With a quick movement, he pushed the door hard, hitting the man square in the face. He screamed in pain and fell back. The other turned around, pulling out his gun, but Tomas came out of the drawer next to him and hit him in the head with the camera, knocking him to the ground. Lucas ran towards the exit, followed by the other 2. There was no time to get anything else. The island's alarm sounded. The invaders knew they were there. The 3 of them ran down the dark hallway, quickly climbing the stairs. The mansion now seemed like a maze of shadows, with the sounds of more footsteps approaching. When they arrived at the front door, they saw 2 more armed men appearing at the main entrance. The only way left was through the back of the house. They ran toward the dense forest that surrounded part of the island, jumping over fallen furniture and debris. The wind carried the sound of water lapping against rocks, reminding them that the only real way out was through the sea. Their boat was still anchored in the western part of the island. If they could get to him, perhaps they could escape. But the island was treacherous. The terrain was uneven, full of low trees and loose rocks. Adrenaline made each step heavier, and the screams of their pursuers echoed behind them. The shots came next. Bullets cut through the air, hitting tree trunks and surrounding rocks. The 3 threw themselves to the ground, seeking cover behind a pile of rocks. Lucas looked at Daniel with panic in his eyes. "We should never have come." But it was already too late for regrets. The boat was still about 200 meters away. The engine needed to be started, and the time it took could be the difference between escaping or not. Daniel took a deep breath. "We ran together. We don't stop. We don't look back." Tomas clutched the camera to his chest. The video was still recording. If they survived, the world would know what was on that island. One last shot grazed Lucas as he shot toward the boat. Daniel and Tomas followed closely behind, hearing the screams of their pursuers approaching. Lucas jumped into the boat first and started the engine. The noise broke the silence of the night. Daniel threw himself onto the deck and pulled Tomas along with him at the exact moment one of the men arrived at the edge of the pier, raising his gun to shoot. The engine roared. The vessel quickly moved away from the island, leaving the pursuers behind. The breathing of all 3 was heavy. Their clothes were dirty, their bodies were shaking. But they had succeeded. Little St. James lay behind, silent and shadowy in the moonlight. They knew that they could never go back there. But they also knew that they had something no one had ever achieved before. The definitive proof that the island was never really abandoned.